Yeah, that what we should do. Hold on.
All right, I want to thank everyone for joining, and I especially want to thank Rabbi Spetner for preparing some Divrei Torah for us as we prepare for Shabbos. And it's really exciting to have Rabbi Spetner back in good health and ready to give this year again. So you should come.
Okay. Now, thank you, Rabbi Alt. Now, I want to just say that this year really is has sentimental value because 27 years ago, this Parshas Pekudei, I shared the idea behind this Dvar Torah from the pulpit at Gulf Manor Synagogue.
Really?
Just to give you a sense of what things were like in the old days. I think I'm really doing this for Rabbi Alt because other people on this call actually remember it. That was, I have to say, I got up there and I saw, it looked to me like every seat was filled. And there were more seats in those days. The bima was not in the middle. There were seats in the middle too, including in the men's and the women's sections, both women's sections and both men's sections. As far as I can recall, it seemed to me that it was completely full. It was a regular, pretty relatively cold Shabbos morning, and then I think it was January, it may have been February at that point, and so that was this has some special meaning for me. The other reason is
what was the occasion of his Spetner?
That was we were bringing a sample Kollel. In other words, the way I sold it was that you're interested in starting a Kollel, you're interviewing different candidates. I'll bring you what a Kollel looks like. So we brought 6 families for Shabbos, and they all give different shiurim, and those, as a matter of fact, one of the original alumni was just emailing me, reminding me what he said a shiur on 27 years ago, when we tried out as a Kollel. In any case, so I really begin with a question, and that is that in this Parsha, we discuss all the details of the construction of the Mishkan, including the figuring out the amounts of gold, silver, and copper that were utilized. And then it goes about just how Hashem commands Moshe to erect the Mishkan. And then in the very end of the Parsha, and this is, I quoted on the source sheet here, if we can bring up the source sheet.
You want that now? Okay, let me pull it up.
If we can. Just to look at the psukim, at the verses themselves, that the Torah talks about. It begins with this pasuk at the very top. You can pinch it out for a bigger view. Vahi b'chodesh harishon b'shana hashenis b'echel hachodesh hukam hamishkan. That it was in the first month, which is Nisan, b'shana hashenis, in the second year, b'echel hachodesh, the first day of the month, hukam hamishkan. The Mishkan was erected, and the Torah, I have a ... there because then it describes how Moshe Rabbeinu put the Mishkan together. But this date, the first of Nisan in the second year, is really discussed in the chronology of the Chumash, is discussed in Parshas Shmini in Vayikra. In other words, the actualization where this actually happens in the middle of Parshas Tzav, 2 weeks from now. We'll read about how they went through the 7 days of Miluim, the 7 days of dedication, which were at the end of Adar, at the end of the month of Adar. And then the 8th day of the dedication, which was the first of Nisan, when was the final erection of the Mishkan by Moshe. That's when Aaron took over, and that was the day that Hashem's Shechina returned, and it's described in detail there. So it's a little strange that the Torah seems to fast forward here at the very end of Parshas Shmos, and here. And even after it describes, I didn't copy it all down, but after it describes the entire process of Moshe Rabbeinu putting together the Mishkan, it closes with the next pasuk right under there in the second line by Yachase Ananas Ohel Moed, right? The cloud pillar covered the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. Chavod Hashem Alei Mishkan, Hashem's glory, right, filled the Mishkan in the form of a cloud. And Moshe could not even enter the Ohel Moed. He shachan alav he'anan, because the anan had been shochin on it, the shechina, right? Hashem has come to rest there. And the covered Hashem filled the Mishkan. And then it describes the process of something that will be not discussed till Sefer Bamidbar, that when the cloud would go up from upon the Mishkan, Yisu b'nei Yisrael b'chol ma'aseim, then they would travel. So that if they didn't go up, then they wouldn't travel. Ki anan Hashem ala Mishkan yomam, because the pillar cloud of Hashem was on the Mishkan during the day. V'eshti alayla bo, the pillar of fire at night. Ve'enei kol beis Yisrael b'chol ma'aseim, in front of the eyes of Beis Yisrael in all of their travels. Now, the question is, why did the Torah fast forward till its conclusion? And in order to address this question, I quoted here from Ramban. Now, this Ramban that I'm quoting you, I divided up into three pieces so that you could look at the English also of this Ramban. I'm going to go through the Hebrew, but you can, if you're more comfortable, you can look at the English as well alongside it. But this Ramban is the Hakdama. It's the preface of the Ramban's commentary to the book of Shmos. At the very beginning of Shmos, sometimes it's even found in some editions. It's even found in the end of Bereshis. In some editions, it's in the beginning of Shmos. But it's very, very relevant to our understanding of the very closure of Sefer Shmos, as I will explain. Now, I wanted just to give you a sense of the significance of this Hakdama, of this preface. Rav Yitzchak Hutner, who was the head of the Chaim Berlin Yeshiva, who was one of the greatest thinkers and philosophers of the last century, and he would speak every day of Pesach. He would speak about in the yeshiva. He would speak about issues involving Pesach. And one of his early students, who was my secular studies principal when I was in high school, Rabbi Yosef Wolk, Zichrono Livracha, who was himself quite a Talmid Chacham, he told me that even though normally Rav Hutner would give what was called a mimer, it was called a long involved speech, much of which is written up and published in a book today, but he would give these long, over an hour of speaking. One time he got up and all he did was read these, what I have here is 3 paragraphs. He read this Hakdama and he sat down. That was his entire, he just read it and that was it. And you were supposed to glean from it because it's so fundamental that it bears on us to understand it and read it and consider the issues that he's raising. So let's take a look at this Ramban's Hakdama, his preface. Hishlim Hakasav Sefer Bereshis. So at the beginning of Shmos now, we talk about the fact that the Torah, the Kasav, has completed the Sefer Bereshis, Shehu Sefer Hayetzira. That's the book of creation. B'chidush ha'olam, with describing how Hashem created the world from new. It was a new world. V'yetziras kol notzar, and the formation of everything that was formed. Now, and not only that, but it also discusses, even though the formation of the world is only the very beginning of the book, and maybe you'll include the post-Diluvian world, which is right after the Mabul, but it also goes on to discuss all the issues involving our forefathers, with the things that occur to our forefathers. Shehem ki'inyan yitzira lezaram. In a way, that's part of the formation for their children. Now, why is that? And the Ramban here references a fundamental idea that he talks about many times in the book of Parshas. Shekol mikrehem, all the occurrences, all the things that happen to the patriarchs are tziyurei dvarim. They are the form of things that lirmos, to allude lahodia, and to inform kol asid lovo lahem. Everything is going to happen to their generations. What we is commonly referred to as ma'aseh avos siman levanim. The actions, or what happens to the fathers, is a siman, is a sign for their children. The most famous of them is that Avram needed to go down to Egypt, and he left with great wealth. The same thing is going to happen to the Jewish people. They're also going to go down to Egypt because of a famine, and they're going to come out with great wealth. So that's just one of the many examples of how the history of the patriarchs mirrored what is going to happen. So in a way, it's a formation of the history of the Jewish people is what's happening. So that he's trying to explain that even though Chazal, our sages, referred to the book of Parshas as Sefer HaYetzirah, as the book of creation, and you might then say, well, creation, it's only creation in the first couple of Parshas. After that, it's not about creation, it's about the patriarchs. Oh no, says the Ramban, that itself is a form of creation. It's a creation, it's creating the history of the Jewish people. That's in that sense, it's creation. And the reason I make this, I'm emphasizing this point of how he's explaining that the term book of creation is relevant to the entire book is because he's going to make the same kind of argument when it comes to the book of Shmos, and we'll see in just a moment. But once he completed the discussion of the formation, both of the physical world and of the historical world of the Jewish people, Hischel Sefer Acher. So then we begin a different Sefer, which is Shmos. Inyan Hamaisa Habam and Haramazim Hahem, regarding the Amaisa, the actualization that came from these allusions and these hints that happened to our forefathers. Now, I just want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the term Sefer Yetzirah and another term that's used for Shmos, which is called Sefer HaGeula, the book of redemption. And if you think about it, the terms that were used, I guess they were in terms of Latin: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Those are all terms in Latin for the names that our sages Chazal gave to these books. In other words, we use the words of the first Parsha, Shmos, because Elu Shmos B'nai Yisrael, Bereshis, that's the first word, right? Vayikra, Hashem, right? It's Vayikra, right? Bamidbar, right? Dvarim, Ela, Dvarim. So these are the first words, but that's not how Chazal referred to these. They had names that describe the essence of the books. Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation, that's Genesis. Exodus is about the Geula, about the redemption. Leviticus is Torah's Kohanim, the laws of the Kohanim, of the Levites. Right? Numbers is the Sefer Pekudim, the book of counting, which is all the censuses that happen there. And Deuteronomy is Mishnah Torah, the Deuteronomy, the second Torah. So those terms are significant. What the Ramban is going to turn his attention to is trying to understand in what sense is it appropriate to call the book of Shmos the Sefer HaGeula. So he says, let's read that next paragraph. In this Yachid Sefer Ve'ela Shmos, right, it was set apart, right, the book of Eila Shmos, B'inyan HaGolus Harishon, regarding, it deals with the very first exile, HaNigzar Beferish, that was decreed explicitly, right? Because it was told to Avram Avinu at the covenant of the parts, the Bris Beit Sarim, right? Ger Yezeracha, that your children will be strangers in a foreign land. They'll go out for Chush Gadol, they'll go out with a great wealth. All this was foretold explicitly. Now it's So it talks about the first Golus, Uvagu'ula Mimenu, and the redemption from that Golus. And that's why he says, Chazar v'histel v'shemos Yordei Mitzrayim. That's why it begins at the very beginning of Shmos, talks about it repeats the names of those who went down to Egypt, umisparim, their numbers, and there were 70 of them. Even though it's written already in Parshas Vayigash, Ba'avur ki yiridasim sham hu reishis hagolos kimi'az huchal, because it's being repeated because it's letting us know that this is the beginning of the golus that happened to this group of people. Let's move on though to the next paragraph, which is the most significant. Behine, behold, hagolus eino nishlam. This golus was not really complete ad yom shuvam el mekomam, until they've returned to their place. Now we'll see in a moment that place here in the Ramban's terminology doesn't refer to necessarily a physical place, but rather to a status. As he says in the very next line, malas avosim yashuvu, to the lofty position of their forefathers they return. When they get back, that's when they are redeemed. That's when Geula really happens. Geula isn't simply going out of Egypt. So as the Ramban now explains, when they went out of Egypt, even though they went out of the house of slaves, of bondage, right? They exited the actual bondage. Golim. They were still considered golim, exiles. Why? They were in a land that didn't belong to them. Nevuchim b'midbar, lost in the desert, in the wilderness. Now, however, El Har Sinai, when they came to Har Sinai. Now, let me just cut away here for a second. And that is, what's the Ramban is coming here to address now is the question of if this is the book of redemption, so why is the majority of the book dedicated to things that happen after the redemption, after leaving Egypt? And he's addressing that by the fact that the building of the Mishkan, the receiving of the Torah, and the building of the Mishkan are critical elements in the Jewish people's redemption. And he'll explain how. So he says, when they came to Har Sinai, and they made the Mishkan, and Hashem returned the and he allowed his Shechina, his divine presence, to come to rest among them. Az shavu el malas avosam. Then they returned to the lofty estate of their fathers. That's what he said. A person is considered to be in Golus as long as they haven't gotten back to where their fathers were, to their original position, lofty position. What was the Mila? What was that loftiness of their forefathers? Shoyasoda loka aleim. The secret of Hashem, or the secret presence of Hashem, was ale aleim. It was on top of their tents, the tents of our patriarchs and matriarchs. That's where it says by Sari Menu, Anan Kasher ala Oel. There was a pillar of cloud over her tent. The Shechina was Shora. It doesn't just mean the oven. All of a sudden, the most, Mamish Hashem's Shechina was present over their tents, over there where they lived. The Haim HaMerkava. They are the Merkava. The Merkava, of course, is a term that's used at the very beginning of Sefer Yechezkel. It's the Hashem's holy chariot that bears the Shechina of Hashem. But they were the Merkava. The Merkava is those who bear Hashem's mission in the world. Their activities and their actions brought the attributes of Hashem's kindness, of Hashem's strength, of Hashem's Rachmanos. They brought those things into the world through their actions, and they were the vehicles, if you will. They were the vehicles of Hashem's Shechina in this world. So when we got back to the same position that they were in, that we made a Mishkan and Hashem's Shechina returned, then they were considered to be redeemed. And therefore, says Ramban, this is the kicker, Nishlam HaSefer Hazeh, this book is completed by Shlimo Inyan HaMishkan, when it completes the whole issue involving the Mishkan. Uviyos Kvod Hashem Moleo So Tamid, and with Hashem's glory filling it constantly. That closing words of Sefer Shmos, even though we said it's a fast forward to something that occurs in Parsha Shemini, but in order to complete the picture of what was happening, why we were building a Mishkan, was in order for Hashem's Shekhinah to dwell once again amongst the Jewish people, and the Jewish people to return to the lofty estate of their ancestors. That's when they achieved Geula. Geula is synonymous for the Jewish people with being the Merkava of Hashem's Shekhinah, for us to be the place where Hashem's presence is manifest in this world. That's when the Jewish people are Ge'ulim. It's not even, they don't have to be even in the land of Eretz Yisrael. And they just, as long as they have achieved that status that was achieved by their ancestors, that they've become the Merkava of the Shekhinah, they've become the vehicle of Hashem's presence in the world, they are Ge'ulim. And that's why we had to close with these words. Now, how did David Spetner tie this into the idea of a Kollel coming to Cincinnati back in 27 years ago? I did that because it says that Beis Hamikdash, after Hashem's the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, right, where Hashem's Shekhinah was manifest, right? Hashem has nowhere else in His world. Only the 4 amos, the 4 cubits of where halacha is studied. That's where Hashem's Shekhinah can be found. It's the vehicle for Hashem's Shekhinah in this world. That was my sales pitch, as you would say 27 years ago, that Hashem's Shekhinah comes to rest in those places, and we still have the opportunity today when we study Torah. So that is a synopsis of the drasha from 27 years ago in Parshas Pekudei. You can Rabbi Alt, you can stop the share.
Sure.
Because this is where I'm going to stop the share.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Spetner. That was amazing.
My pleasure.
And I'm glad to see that your sales pitch was very successful.
Baruch Hashem.
They bought.
Yeah, good Chodesh, everybody. Good Shabbos. And every happy Adar.
That's right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you again, Rabbi Spetner, for sharing. And I wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos, a good Chodesh, and have a wonderful night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Very good. Thank you.